Hi. Alright, we're going to talk about 6 misconceptions about wedding photography that you, yes you, need to be aware of when searching for your wedding photographer for your wedding. Misconception number 1. Purchasing digital negatives means that you will receive fully edited images. False. This is not always the case. And this is something that's extremely important for you to understand because it can cost you hundreds if not thousands of dollars down the road if you misunderstand or misinterpret what they're saying. To some photographers, digital negatives are a lot like film negatives back in the day, where they are, they're raw files, they're unedited, they've got tons of potential if you know how to use them. Whereas to some other photographers, digital negatives can mean fully edited images that are in high resolution, ready for you to then go take to your local photo lab and have prints printed off, a big nice canvas print or something like that. But it's so important that you understand that to some it means completely unedited files, and while the other end of the spectrum it can also mean that they are fully edited files like the ones you see on their website. Because if you don't understand that and you end up choosing a photographer where digital negatives mean, just the raw files, then it can also, typically those type of photographers will charge you anywhere in the neighborhood of, I don't know, $35 to $75 an hour to edit those files for you so that they look more like the photos you'll see on their website. And an hour of work will typically yield, I don't know, 3 to 6 images. So if you're looking to get hundreds of those photos edited to look like the ones on their website, it can cost you a good chunk of change. So you need to be aware of that when making your decision with your photographer. So definitely be on the same page with them. Ask them questions about what their digital negatives mean, and then just to make sure that you don't get hammered with fees down the road. Alright, misconception number 2. Anyone who is talented at photography will make a great wedding photographer. No, this is rarely the case. The most common example of this is, say, a landscape photographer gets asked to shoot a wedding for a friend. And the friend is thinking this whole time, well, this guy is so good at shooting mountains and valleys, rivers, waterfalls, whatever it may be. Everything I've seen is just gorgeous, and so shooting this wedding will be a walk in the park. It's practically the same thing. No, it's not the same thing. It's like asking a foot doctor to perform corrective eye surgery on you. Are you going to do that? No, probably not. That would be ridiculous. But sometimes we get confused into thinking that, and it's each specialization within photography requires a completely different setup. Whether that's equipment or procedure or just your approach and mentality is completely different when you go from weddings to, say, landscape photography or food photography or product photography or anything like that. It's a totally different mindset altogether. And I have personal experience with this. Unfortunately, my sister-in-law decided to have her friend, who's a great action photographer, shoot their wedding. And although he is a stellar photographer, I love his work, and he does an awesome job. He shoots a lot of skiing and mountain biking and other things. But anyways, they had him shoot their wedding, and the results came back, and they were just so devastated because the photos were unnatural and sterile and kind of out of place a little bit, and that's been her biggest regret ever since. We can't bring up her wedding without her saying that she should have gone with someone different for the photography, just because she didn't know better, and it's unfortunate, but that's the case. And so, again, misconception number 2: just because someone's a good photographer doesn't mean that they'll be a great photographer at your wedding. Misconception number 3. Good photos are the result of good equipment. People assume that because someone owns the latest and greatest equipment, photography equipment, that they'll be able to take the best photos. And that's why it's actually one of the most common phrases I hear as a photographer. They'll see my photos and say, "Oh, man, your photos are awesome. Your camera must be so nice. And it's, I laugh just because they think that there's this idea with a lot of people that it's the camera that takes the photo and does all the, determines which setting to use and where to stand and when to shoot, and that's absurd. I mean, certainly the equipment can help in certain circumstances, but it's not going to tell you all those things. It's not going to say you should move in on this frame to make it more intimate. It's not going to say step back a little bit when using the flash in this area. It's the list of things that it can't do is much greater than the list of things it can do. And it's sad to think that some people believe that all the time, that it's the equipment that counts, and so they'll just kind of throw this list of equipment in your face and say, well, I've got all this equipment, therefore I've got to be an awesome photographer, right? And there's actually this prevailing thought around the wedding photography, or well, around the wedding industry among brides and grooms, that, hey, ask for their list of equipment. And I think that can be helpful at times if you know what that means, if you know what having a wide angle lens is going to mean, or if a high ISO camera body or anything like that. If you know all the technical jargon and what that can translate into, then sure, you can ask them, but I don't think it's going to determine exactly how they're going to shoot or what settings that they're going to use or anything like that. So it's not the equipment that necessarily makes the great photo. It's the person behind the lens that does all that dictates what settings to use, when to shoot, and all that stuff. And so don't get fooled by all those people that just think it's all about the equipment, because it's not. Misconception number 4. High amounts of megapixels produce the best photos. This is another common misconception, and it's actually in conjunction with misconception number 3. And it dates back for a while. For years, camera companies have been marketing their products to consumers by primarily touting the megapixel size of their camera. So in the late 90s, we're talking 1.2, 2 megapixel cameras, and now upwards to 5, 6, 7, 8, and beyond megapixel cameras. However, megapixels are not a measurement of the quality of the photo. They're only a measurement of the printable size. So for example, a 3 megapixel camera can print easily a 5x7 photo print. And an 8 megapixel camera can print an 8x10 print that looks sharp without any post-production or anything. That's what we're talking about. But one thing to note is that anything above 8 megapixels will be able to print pretty much any size beyond 8x10 with a little post-production preparation. The quality of your print isn't determined by the megapixels. It's actually determined primarily by the image sensor. So at times you can have, it's easy to see how some people have, an 8 megapixel print, or excuse me, an 8 megapixel camera that prints a beautiful 8x10 print, a photograph that looks sharp and nice, while their friend prints an 8x10 from a 15 megapixel camera that looks terrible. And it's not the amount of megapixels that determines the quality of the print. It's actually the quality of the camera sensor inside the camera. And so, again, don't just base it off megapixels alone. Misconception number 5. The more stuff that comes in your photography package, the better. This is an easy trap to fall into, but when you're looking for a photographer, do not get caught up in the amount of products that photographer is promising. Stay focused on the quality of work being provided. It's that simple. I know at times it's tough because you're trying to stay within your budget. So one trick that helps a lot of people is to think, okay, well, what can I get down the road? What can I get after the wedding once we're a little more financially stable? Think of your prints, your gallery wraps, your canvas wraps, your albums, stuff like that. That can all be purchased down the road if necessary. So remember that. But the one thing that you cannot change after the wedding is the quality of the photographs. You simply cannot change that after the wedding. So always take that into account. And if there is something that you need to cut from the package to make it more affordable, cut with the products. Start with the products and see if you can get down to a reasonable amount. But don't go with a cheaper photographer that promises all the products. Just because they promise all those products. Don't go with them just for that reason alone. Because what I've found is a lot of times those are the photographers that don't value their work, their actual photography work, as much as other people. And that's why they feel like they have to supplement it with all these extra products. And that's not always the case, but a lot of times it is. So be sure to look at that a little more carefully, and again, focus on the quality of the photography as your base. Misconception number 6. It's always better to have 2 photographers instead of just one. If you're thinking of hiring multiple photographers for the sole reason of getting lots and lots of images and viewpoints, don't forget that you shouldn't ever skimp on quality. It's very, very rare that quantity will ever trump quality. It's way more important for you to focus on the talent and the portfolio of the photographer or the photographers that you're considering than it is the actual number that will be there on your wedding day. It's different for everyone. Some photographers prefer to work alone so that they know that, hey, if I want this shot, I'm going to get it. I don't have to hope that my partner is going to go get it. I'm going to go do it. It's that simple. Other people prefer to work in pairs. And it's not, both approaches can be successful. I'm not saying that one is necessarily better than the other, but I think there is, in a lot of cases, it's not always better to have 2 photographers. There's just, how many times have you been to a wedding where there are multiple photographers and you see one just hanging out while the other one takes all the photos? You're not really getting twice as many photos as you originally thought. And that's why a lot of photographers tend to work in pairs, is so that they can trade off, and so that both of them don't have to work the entire time. So just remember that when you're considering multiple photographers, and again, most importantly, look at their portfolio, look at their talent, talk to their references, so that you can be assured that you're going to get the type of images that you want and not just twice as many.